What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC fights, and we have the first pay-per-view of the year, UFC 283, up next this Saturday, and it is featuring two championship bouts that are super exciting. The vacant light heavyweight championship on the line between Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill, and in the co-main event, we've got the flyweight championship defended by Davison Figueiredo facing his rival at this point. I mean, this is the fourth time these guys are fighting. Brandon Moreno, former flyweight champion, trying to get his belt back. 15 fights on this card, a lot of high-level talent. I'm super excited for this card, and it is back in Brazil for the first time since the pandemic, and this is the first time in Brazil with a crowd since the end of 2019, so super excited the UFC is back in Brazil. The crowds are always amazing, and I mean, the Brazilians are really the backbone of mixed martial arts and the UFC in general. 12 weight classes in the UFC, Brazilians have held championships in 10 of those divisions, so we really owe a lot of the classic performances and high-level talent to Brazil, so it's good to be back there. Like I said, 15 fights on this card, so I'm going to be brief with my explanations, point out the bets and the spots I do like, who I think is going to win, and yeah, leave a comment below on what your favorite fight is on this card. For me, I'm looking forward to that flyweight championship in the co-main event the most. And as usual, this video is partnered with BetUS Sportsbook, a partner of my channel. And of course, you can use that 125% deposit match bonus on your first deposit as a new customer. Use the promo code listed below, Addicted to Combat 125, and they'll multiply your deposit initially up to $2,500 by 125%. So check them out, and let's get into the first fight of the night. First fight of the night on the prelims, we have Daniel Marcos and Saimon Oliveira, a bantamweight battle here with the Peruvian newcomer making his debut in Daniel Marcos, taking on Brazil's own Saimon Oliveira, who has been in the UFC one time, giving up a decision loss to Tony Gravely. Both of these bantamweights had successful decision results on the Dana White Contender Series. I would say Marcos's victory on the show was a little bit more impressive. He dominated his opponent, Brandon Lewis, with excellent striking. Daniel Marcos, 13-0 professional career so far, mostly in the Peruvian Fight League 300 Sparta, where he also had a 6-0 amateur career as well. So 7 knockouts, 6 decisions. This guy is going to be by far and away the better striker, in my opinion. Saimon Oliveira is a Muay Thai fighter with good striking and good power, but the guy is just way less technical than Marcos, in my opinion. And Oliveira does like to dabble in the submission fighting as well. He's got 11 submissions. I think 7 or 8 of those are guillotines as well. And that's what cost him against Tony Gravely. Oliveira was jumping guillotine, I think, like, half a dozen times at least, and they were not very successful. He ended up giving up 11 takedowns as a result. His cardio, was diminished because Tony Gravely is a powerful wrestler and just ground him out over 3 rounds. But yeah, I think his striking is a little bit, too risky for my liking. I think Marcos has the good range control, the timing, the feints, good pull counters, and very good step-in knees as well from Marcos. So if this stays standing, I think Marcos is going to win this fight dominantly. The thing is, Marcos can be taken down. He can be pressured in the clinch. He hasn't faced a high level of, just submission fighter in general. Not saying Oliveira is there. His wrestling is definitely a work in progress. But I see this as a battle of two guys here who, they could look entirely different in this fight against each other, right? Marcos, if he improves his wrestling defense faster than Oliveira improves his wrestling offense, maybe he can win. I think it's going to be a product of how long Marcos can keep this fight standing on the feet in the round. If Oliveira scores a quick takedown and can hold position there for most of the round early, it could be an Oliveira night. But ultimately, I'm going to trust in Marcos to continue this undefeated streak. He is a plus 140 underdog here. Saimon Oliveira, a minus 160 favorite. So yeah, first fight of the night, I'm picking an underdog here. Not sure I'll bet on this fight, although Marcos was impressive on the Contender Series. He did gas out towards the end of the 3rd round. No shame there for most people, but his cardio just didn't seem elite since he spent most of the fight striking, which he liked to do. He didn't have to spend much time defensively grappling, and he still gassed out. So I can only imagine if he has to do both in this fight. But give me Daniel Marcos as an underdog pick. Not sure I'll be betting on this fight, but I think this does go to the scorecards, and Marcos gets his hand raised. Up next at bantamweight, we've got Cody Stamann welcoming a newcomer to the UFC. Lacerda is making his debut. Brazilian submission threat, 12-1 professional record for the 30-year-old Lacerda. I think he's Nova União affiliated, so a very high-level team that he's trained with in the past. And he's coming off of the LFA promotion where he went 2-0 as a professional, scoring 2 submissions. Out of his 12 wins, 10 of them are by submission. There's no secret to Luan Lacerda's game. Just wants to stand there, be patient on the feet, wait for you to overswing where he can dive down for a single leg, just grab any limb he can find. And he does cut his takedowns. He cuts the angle pretty well, usually can complete them. If not, just threaten with a heel hook off of his back to try to grab your hips or expose your back and take you that way. His transitions from submission to submission are extremely smooth and dangerous. Not fighting the highest level of competition so far, but he's looked pretty good. But Cody Stamann is an 11 UFC fight veteran, going 6-4 and 1 draw in those appearances. He's a minus 375 favorite is Stamann, so it's going to be Stamann's wrestle boxing style against a pure BJJ threat in Luan Lacerda, who's the plus 310 underdog. And at bantamweight, it's kind of a weird spot to see Luan Lacerda enter the UFC. At this point, he's 30 years old. He'll be, the same height, a little bit of reach over Cody Stamann, who's got those short, stocky arms. But Cody Stamann's a power threat, not a big finisher at the UFC level, but he's been facing very high-level competition. You see 2 submission losses for Cody Stamann. Those are against Aljamain Sterling and also against Said Nurmagomedov. So Cody Stamann did have that kind of a gimme fight against Eddie Wineland, who he knocked out as he should. But before that, he was on quite a bit of a losing streak. So there's kind of been a big disparity between skill in the opponents of Cody Stamann, right? He's facing, the guys like Said Nurmagomedov, guys like, Murad Davalishvili, who beat him by decision, Aljamain Sterling I mentioned, and then he's fighting lower-level competition as well. So, kind of hit or miss with his competition. I think his experience here and his Division II credentials in wrestling at the collegiate level should really be enough to, stifle the pure BJJ threat from Luan Lacerda. But part of Cody Stamann's game is predicated on him getting the fight to the mat, scoring those takedowns in control time. So that just right there, it kind of raises the percentage that Luan Lacerda could find that Hail Mary submission and end the fight. But I do think Lacerda's victory is kind of submission dependent here, so I got to take Cody Stamann. But like I said, a wrestle boxing style, somebody who engages in the grappling in his own right. I don't think he's going to want to play that game against Lacerda, but Stamann's striking should be by far and away effective enough to win minutes on the feet. So I'm going to pick Cody Stamann. Not much I can do with a minus 375 favorite in Stamann, but the under 2.5 is at plus 200, which that could cover the Hail Mary submission threat of Lacerda here. Could also cover the the knockout potential if Cody Stamann is that much more advanced than Lacerda on the feet, like it looks on tape. So maybe the under is the play, but so far it's a pass betting wise for me. Give me Stamann to get a decision victory. Okay, up next at women's featherweight, a rare 145-pound bout in the female division. Josia Nunes, the Brazilian, taking on Zarah Fairn, the French striker here. And this is a spot where we haven't seen Zarah Fairn in almost 3 years now. It's been a long layoff. In fact, this bout between these two is supposed to have taken place at least once or twice before. Fairn is always pulling out of these bouts due to weight-cutting issues or injury or otherwise. But so far, Nunes has been 2-0 in the UFC. Zarah Fairn has been 0-2 in the UFC, losing to both Megan Anderson and Felicia Spencer, both by round 1 stoppages. Zarah Fairn is 36 years old at this point, so 7 years older than Nunes. Nunes is a power puncher. She's finished 7 of her 9 wins by knockout, which is unheard of at this weight class, at bantamweight and at featherweight for the women's divisions. Now, Zarah Fairn, very non-existent grappling, very non-existent striking defense, but so far she's managed to rack up 6 professional wins just based on her size, in my opinion, her size and reach at the weight class. She can sometimes stalk her opponents down, bully them, and land some strikes, but Fairn has no regard for her own safety, her own chin. She will march forward. She is very brave and open to getting hit just to land one in return. But her technique is very poor, and I could see Josia Nunes finishing Zarah Fairn very early by knockout, the way that she finished B. Malecki with that big jab, overhand left that Nunes kind of has made her signature knockout blow. So, the aggressive pace of Nunes, she's shown that she has 3-round cardio at least. She fought Ramona Pascal, almost got Pascal out of there, but Pascal was able to use her size and a little bit of wrestling to slow down the pace of the fight. Fairn is not going to have that privilege in this fight, and I think she gets stalked down and finished by knockout under 1.5 rounds. Now, minus 550 on the money line for Nunes. Huge, wide money line. There's not much you can do with that. The KO prop on Nunes is minus 125. So, again, it's likely going to happen that way, but paying chalk on a female fighter to get the knockout is just not a good idea. The under 1.5 rounds might be a good look for this one as well. But, again, hard to do that in a women's fight, in my opinion. It's just hard to pull the trigger on that type of bet. So just going to watch this one and hope this fight actually does materialize and Zarah Fairn doesn't pull out once again due to like a weight cut miss or something. So give me Nunes for the round 1 or early round 2 knockout. Up next at welterweight, we've got Warlley Alves returning to take on Nicholas Dalby. Very close fight here at welterweight, in my opinion. A pretty dicey fight. I don't have a solid take on, in my opinion. I think it's lined about appropriately. Plus 100, slight underdog price for Nicholas Dalby. Warlley Alves, minus 120, the slight favorite. I think that's just a product of the fact that Warlley Alves is the more dangerous fight ender in this spot. But Nicholas Dalby, he does have a good pace, good cardio. Dalby is the Danish karate stance fighter. Wide base, good kicks, good in and out movement with his linear strikes. And a pretty good, striking output and defense to match. So this is Nicholas Dalby's second stint in the UFC. He's been pretty, inconsistent in his career, but so has Warlley Alves, to be honest. And I think both of these guys have their better days behind them. Their impressive wins are in the past, right? Warlley Alves is a guy who, went to decision with Kamaru Usman on his way up. He also got a guillotine victory over Colby Covington. You know what I mean? So these are like... high-level performances, but they're in the past, and Warlley Alves is coming off of a 1.5 year long layoff after getting flatlined, put out cold by Jeremiah Wells. I believe Wells was making his debut on short notice in that bout as well a 1.5 years ago. So Nicholas Dalby, a guy who goes to decision quite a bit in the UFC. Even one of his better wins was against, Cowboy Oliveira. He took Darren Till to a split draw or a majority draw there. He beat Daniel Rodriguez. I mean, these are pretty high-level wins. But, again, trading wins and losses for both of these guys at times. I can see Warlley Alves starting off very hot in this fight. And Dalby's not an easy guy to put away historically. Only been finished one time by Jesse Ronson, turned to a no contest. So if Alves, empties the gas tank in round 1, can't get the job done, I think Dalby can take over in rounds 2 and rounds 3 with his high output and his good conditioning. And that's what he did against his last opponent, Claudio Silva, who is an older guy, definitely past his prime. But I don't know what version of Warlley Alves I'm going to get in this spot. So, I will give the youth, of course, the power and the BJJ to Warlley Alves. But Dalby's got, just the schedule activity so far. He's been fighting often, good striking output, and probably the cardio goes in his favor as well. So pretty low confidence pick here, but I'll take the slight underdog Nicholas Dalby to edge out a decision against the returning Warlley Alves. Up next at lightweight, we've got the returning Terrence Mckinney welcoming a debuting fighter named Ismail Bonfim to the UFC. The Bonfim brothers, we're going to have 2 of these guys making their debut on this card. They just came off the Contender Series where they both scored victories. Ismail Bonfim, a boxing background, but a very well-rounded lifetime mixed martial artist on a big win streak, the Brazilian. He's 18-3. Started his career very young. I think at 15 he had his first pro fight. He's been in jungle fights as a teenager, made his way in his early 20s to the LFA where he went 2-0. But yeah, out of his 18 wins, he's got 12 finishes, 8 knockouts, 4 submissions. And just like Terrence Mckinney, I mean, he's a very fast starter with power in his strikes. 6 first-round stoppages of his own for Bonfim. So he does have that inactive schedule, not a whole lot of fights, strung together in succession, but like I said, he started his career very young, so there's been layoffs and things like that just to get better. 5'8", he'll be a little bit shorter with a little bit less reach, but he's 27 years old, just a year younger than Terrence Mckinney. Boxing background, his hand speed is great, good combinations, and some explosive movements, just like Terrence Mckinney, right? Stepping and flying knees, spinning wheel kicks, and the guy's got a pretty accurate strike selection as well. But he can be wide and looping over the course of a fight as it goes on and counterable. But I gotta say, I think his power is there. His hand speed, like I said, like a lead left hook to the body, followed up by a lead left hook up top, like in succession. Just really slick combinations. You can tell his boxing is crisp. The defensive grappling, I have not seen tested a lot. Sometimes he can be stalemated against the cage. I think a wrestler with the caliber of Terrence McKinney is going to give him trouble in this matchup ultimately. But the high level, like the grappling type of fighters that I've seen Bonfim face, they never really got a chance to get their grappling off successfully against him. So that part of his record is clean so far, but I think it will be tested in this matchup because you've got Terrence McKinney who has no warming up period in his fights, no data collecting. He goes right for the finish. Just heavy-handed guy, but he was originally a wrestler, I think wrestling alongside Michael Chiesa, who I think was his coach at a certain point as well. So, and we saw a little bit of a maturation in Terrence McKinney's game. In his last fight, it was another round-one stoppage against Eric Gonzalez, where he was a massive favorite. But still, he got in a firefight with Eric Gonzalez. At a certain point, that firefight started to go against him, and he switched, level changed, got the takedown, and managed to get a submission in round one. So, Terrence McKinney actually has 8 submissions and 5 knockouts. Never seen the scorecards yet, which is always concerning, but so far, he hasn't had to. The Drew Dober fight was a wake-up call for him, I think, because he threw 150% into all of his strikes, and, you just can't fight at that pace. Drew Dober's chin was able to absorb the strikes somehow after being knocked down, and it got, reversed last March, and McKinney ended up finding himself looking up at the lights, knocked out in round one. So, I gotta say, the over-under, of course, it's a Terrence McKinney fight. It's set at 1.5 rounds. The under looks like it would be the move, but it is minus 200, so I'm not really keen on playing that. But I gotta say, the size, the power, and of course the ability to turn this into a wrestling match and look for a submission just goes in the favor of Terrence McKinney. I think it's a good spot for him. Another power striker that'll engage in a firefight, and then I think he can turn the tables and look for the submission. So give me McKinney, another round one finish. I think it'll be by submission. I do like his money line. It's at minus 125 currently. I believe I got that at minus 115 for a couple units there. So actually, I just double checked. That was just 1.15 units to win one at minus 115 for Terrence McKinney. So just double check those odds. They are slightly moving in the favor of Terrence McKinney, I'm seeing now, but still a pretty closely lined fight. Bonfim is not the worst underdog in the world at plus 105 currently. He's been to decision a few more times than Terrence McKinney, done it successfully, but overall, I just think that McKinney is going to have the more well-rounded game here and probably just start this fight at a pace that I don't think Bonfim can match. So give me Terrence McKinney, 1.15 units to win one. Oh man, I can't wait for this one. At heavyweight, we have Jailton Almeida taking on Shamil Abdurakhimov. This should be a pretty quick breakdown. Jailton Almeida is a minus 900 to minus 1100 favorite over Shamil Abdurakhimov, who can be had somewhere in the neighborhood of plus 600. And heavyweight fight, but Jailton Almeida, he can make 205, but he's been doing these catch weights or, just weighing in super low at like 220 pounds for the heavyweight fights he finds himself in. He came on the Contender Series back in 2021, just demolish his opponent, early round 2 stoppage, I believe. Now he's 3-0 in the UFC, and the guy, usually weighs around 217 to 225 pounds, even in a spot where Shamil is going to be, cutting down to that limit at like 265. So Jailton does not care. He's going to shoot for that takedown very early in the fight, get the fight to the mat, and pound your face in so that you expose your neck, and he'll choke you out. He's got 11 subs, 6 knockouts make up his 17 wins, which all have been finished under 1.5 rounds. So he's on a 12-fight win streak right now, looking unstoppable, and nobody really wants to fight Jailton Almeida. Guy's in phenomenal shape, only 31 years old, 6'4", and at this weight class, that's a pretty big frame if he stays at 205 pounds. But Shamil Abdurakhimov is 41 on a 3-fight losing streak, all by knockout. Sergey Pavlovich in round 1. Before that, Chris Daukaus knocked him out, I think, twice in that fight. Got him out of there early round 2. But 3 fights ago, he fought Curtis Blades, and I think this fight kind of looks like that one against Jailton Almeida. Curtis Blades, in 20 seconds, got the fight to the mat, just kind of ragdolled Shamil around, and eventually got the ground and pound stoppage early round 2. So I think it takes one round for Jailton Almeida to pound the face of Shamil, eventually expose the neck, and get that submission round. Round 1 stoppage for Jailton. The under 1.5 is something crazy like minus 350. There's no real way to play this unless you're, I don't know, it's kind of forcing you at that point to look towards the over 1.5 rounds, which is going to be juicy plus money, but very trappy. Nothing would suggest that Shamil is going to last that long or even make it to this fight, but I hope it happens. I want to see more of Jailton Almeida and see where this Brazilian experiment is going next. So give me Jailton Almeida, round 1 submission. Up next at bantamweight, we've got the second of the Bonfim brothers on this card making their debut. This is the younger brother, Gabriel Bonfim, taking on Munir Lazzez at welterweight. The debut of Bonfim, but the 4th walk to the octagon for Munir Lazzez. And Bonfim is special because he rocks a 13-0 professional record so far with 13 wins, all coming by stoppage. He's only been past round 2 a couple of times, I think. So a very interesting prospect here. We'll see if he can get another finish on his record. But so far, Lazzez has been very durable, only losing by stoppage one time to Warley Alves by a series of body strikes. And Lazzez is a very good striker in his own right. I mean, he's coming off of just dismantling Angelusa by decision last year, and he was able to mix up the targets well, stay unpredictable with a series of good kicks going to the body, to the legs, the boxing. He's mixing up to the body and to the head as well. And he's just a very slick kickboxer with some powerful linear strikes that are very long and straight. But up close, he can stand in the pocket and bang with you. If he gets in very close, he'll start throwing elbows and things like that. So just a very good variety of strikes from Munir Lazzez. And he's got pretty good balance to stay on his feet, good anti-wrestling, and very good in the clinch as well. His offensive wrestling is very green. You can tell it's a work in progress. So he mostly keeps the fight standing. And that would be a good idea against Gabriel Bonfim, who's got 10 of his wins by submission. But if you watch some of those, most of the tape on that, it's guys who don't want to stand and bang with Gabriel Bonfim. They're getting the worst end of the striking against him. And, they try to take the fight to the mat, then they get their neck snatched up or something of that sort. So that's kind of the large majority of the fights I've seen that end in submission at the higher level. So Bonfim has got a lot to prove. He's never made it to the scorecards, so we don't know how his cardio is going to end up in like round 3 against a high-level opponent who throws volume like Munir Lazzez. So I would land this fight more 50-50. Incredible record from Bonfim. He's got powerful strikes and opportunistic submissions, but Munir Lazzez is 10 years older, a lot more experience, and we've seen him go to the scorecards and come out victorious, 3 out of the 4 times he's gone there. This is a kind of a coin toss fight in my opinion, but we're getting plus 160 on Lazzez and minus 180 on Bonfim. So I like what I've seen from Lazzez, but there's we got to see how high the ceiling is on Gabriel Bonfim. So I got to take Lazzez here, the battle-tested guy who's been in the UFC, been on the big stage a few more times, and he's looked pretty good so far. So give me Munir Lazzez. I'm not sure if I'll make a wager on this one, but the way the money line is, it's not looking like a bad underdog shot at plus 160. So give me Lazzez by decision. Up next, we have Thiago Moises taking on Melquizael Costa, and Costa is making his debut on short notice here. I think just 1 or 2 weeks of notice because Guram Kutadladze pulled out of this matchup against Moises. So, unfortunately, that match was canceled. It was going to be a good one, but Melquizael Costa coming off of the LFA main event spot where he scored a round 3 TKO stoppage over Junior Melo recently. This guy is 26 years old, and he's a Muay Thai savage, powerful and very competent, high-level striking. I think Costa is certainly UFC caliber, one of these guys that would have come onto the Dana White Contender Series and scored probably like a highlight reel knockout. And he's got power early with 8 round 1 finishes, but out of his 19 wins, 13 of them are finishes, and his power translates late. So spinning techniques, explosive movements, things like that. And he attacks the body, which I love. That's part of how he got the victory over Junior Melo in that fight, just rip into the body with kicks and punches. So Thiago Moises, you can't sleep on the guy's striking. He's very competent, 10 fights in the UFC. In fact, it all stemmed from him getting a Contender Series contract with a head kick knockout as well and some ground and pound. But high-level BJJ practitioner, lifetime. I think in his in his last fight, he beat Christos Giagos by round 1 submission, and he said he's been doing this since he was like 8 years old. So training out of American Top Team, this guy is a beast. He had back-to-back losses last year. Joel Alvarez starched him in round 1 by strikes. Alvarez, of course, a huge and powerful guy. Makhachev, round 4, submitted him, in their headliner. I think that was a year and a half ago now. So he made it to round 4 against Makhachev. No shame there, the current champion. But he's got some solid wrestling to complement his BJJ. Moises will stick to you like glue. He'll get in close on your hips with the rear waist body lock. Maybe a single leg transition to get you against the cage. And then, he can jump on your back with a body triangle and end the fight from a standing position the way he just did against Christos Giagos. So that is a part of Melquizael Costa's game that is lacking. His takedown defense, his wrestling defense. The guy does have good scrambles, and even though he ends up on his back and gets taken down, he can work his way back up pretty well, but it's going to be a lot harder to do that if you give up a takedown from Moises. The level of competition Costa's fought so far, he was able to, give up takedowns and then work his way back to a dominant position, but that's going to be hard to do against Moises. So my pick is Moises. He's a big favorite, no surprise here with a full training camp, but I gotta say, Costa is definitely live to get an upset here. He's live to get a knockout. If he can, stun Moises early, the way that Alvarez did, I think that's certainly a path to victory, but I do think Costa's victory here is dependent on him getting a finish inside the distance by strike. So that's something that not a lot of people have done. I think only one person, only Alvarez, has ever done that to Thiago Moises. So it's going to be a tough task, but I got to say, out of all the people that are big underdogs in this card, I think Costa is certainly UFC ready, and he could pull something out of his ass here, but more often than not, I think look for the fight doesn't go to decision, or look for Moises to win inside the distance. I think he gets that round 1 submission here. Up next at middleweight, one of my favorite fighters on the roster, Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues, taking on the short notice replacement and debuting fighter Bruno Ferreira, who is coming off of a victorious knockout in round 1 on the Contender Series this past season. RoboCop Rodrigues supposed to take on Brad Tavares, which would have been a fun fight. I thought Rodrigues would have easily won that fight, but now he's facing a fellow Brazilian, fellow power puncher who's undefeated at 9-0 is Bruno Ferreira. And this guy has got a 100% finish rate, 6 KOs, 3 submissions. He's going to be the smaller man, though. He's 5'10", very short, stocky guy for this weight class compared to the 6'3" Rodrigues, who's got a big reach advantage, height advantage, and UFC experience advantage as well. Rodrigues has been 4-1 in the UFC so far. The only loss was that close, very competitive decision against Armen Petrosyan, which he easily could have won. But Rodrigues, of course, very powerful striker in his own right. 8 knockouts, 3 submissions make up his 13 wins. He's 2-2 in decisions, so we've seen him have the cardio to persevere through a high-volume fight, including that Petrosyan fight I mentioned. We've seen him, weather the early storm of, some brutal strikes, like the one he just faced against Chidi Njokuani back in September. Got his skull split open by a knee and was spurting blood all over the place. You could see the guy's forehead skull, through the cut at the end of the fight. And he still persevered and stayed on his feet and knocked out Chidi Njokuani, kind of outpaced him in that fight and just overwhelmed him for that TKO stoppage in round 2. So, there's been some questions, on the Contender Series a few years ago. Rodrigues was knocked out by Jordan Williams. So his durability was a little bit in question. His cardio was a little bit in question at times. But over the course of his last 5 fights in the UFC, he's really answered all of those questions and really put to bed any doubt that I had about this guy. So coming off of the back-to-back knockouts over Chidi Njokuani and Julian Marquez impressively, I'm all in on Rodrigues here to get the round 1 knockout or early round 2 knockout. Bruno Ferreira is a very capable guy, and especially at the money line here, we're looking at like a plus 300 underdog price on him, since he is on short notice and he is rather untested in comparison. Let me look at the odds once more here. We're looking at minus 350 for Rodrigues, plus 285 for Bruno Ferreira. Ferreira is a very capable guy, very strong with both hands. His boxing is very powerful, and he switches stances very well, which leads to the unpredictability of you don't know which strike is going to be the powerful one that you've got to watch out for. But I got to say, his cardio is untested. He's never been past 1.5 rounds in his career so far. Very low-level competition on the Brazilian regional scene for Ferreira, and he does the best work when he can slam his opponents to the mat, get all over them, and kind of work to mount, work to side control, and rain down ground and pound and hammer fists. Either getting the submission at times or mostly getting that TKO stoppage. Not a lot of these are like one-hit knockouts on the feet, aside from his most recent one on the Contender Series. But Rodrigues is a guy who's mostly pretty hard to put away. He's got very technical striking, and he's shown that he can go to decision and win those fights there. Not to mention the guy is a very high-level BJJ practitioner. He just never really seems to use it, but we have seen spots where he's, locked in strong body triangles, fished around for submissions. It just doesn't always end up that way. Overall, I see Gregory Rodrigues playing a pretty technical fight in round 1, wearing out the early gas tank of Bruno Ferreira, and taking this into round 2 where he gets that early stoppage. Up next at light heavyweights, we've got the return of Mauricio Shogun Rua taking on a newcomer to the UFC, Ihor Poteiria, who is only 0-1 in the organization, trying to get his first victory in the UFC for the Ukrainian combat sambo fighter. Mauricio Shogun Rua, been in the game for a long time. He was, the Grand Prix championship winner in Pride years ago, had a long career, and got a lot of his best moments at a very young age, but he's 41 years old now. This is his retirement fight, and for the former light heavyweight champion Shogun Rua, it's going to be hard for a lot of us diehard fans to look past what he's done on his resume, because we know how capable this guy is. And he's taking on, like I said, a guy who's 0-1 in the UFC, and Ihor Poteiria, a combat sambo fighter, southpaw, vicious aggression, good power in his hands, and actually a pretty tough guy. But obviously the experience, his resume is very hollow. He came off the Contender Series and now just lost in round 2 by standing TKO to Nikolai Negumereanu, somebody who's not on Shogun's level. But we got to remember that this is the retirement fight of a 41-year-old grizzled veteran in Shogun Rua. And he's a guy who was grizzled before he even got to the UFC. You got to remember back in 2007, he lost his debut to Forrest Griffin, looked a little bit slow, gassed out, and a big theory of why he lost that fight was he had a banged up knee that needed surgery, and that's been repaired on time and time again over the past decade or so. So the guy has had countless injuries over his career. He's like 80 in fight years. The speed has definitely fallen off. The durability has fallen off for Shogun Rua. I think he still, may have, some decent cardio, or at least the ability to work through fatigue. He might edge that out in this fight. Like, he's got the pacing. He's very one strike per one strike, one combination per one combination. If he catches Ihor Poteiria, rushing in recklessly, he could counter. He's still a very good counter striker, is Shogun Rua, but I think Poteiria is going to have, not only a 15-year youth advantage at 26 years old, not only the ability to get better each fight, but he's going to have a height advantage, a reach advantage, and I just really think the guy's going to have a speed advantage in this fight as well. The move forward style works very well against Shogun Rua. If you can put him on his back foot, cut off the cage on him, and he has nowhere to retreat to, you can do very well. In Ihor Poteiria's last fight against Nikolai Negumereanu, he had to deal with a heavy wrestling threat from Nikolai, which wore out his gas tank early, made him hesitant to strike, and always watching out for that takedown threat, and that was kind of his demise in that fight. But Poteiria, I don't think he's going to have that problem in this fight. Shogun is an offensive grappler, but the guy, not a submission threat, not a big wrestling threat in most situations. I think he has like one submission on his record from Kevin Randleman years ago. But again, Kevin Randleman, talk about that name. We're talking about Ricardo Arona, Rampage Jackson, Chuck Liddell. The list goes on of legends that Alistair Overeem, I hate to say, people that Shogun has dominated over the years, but this is a long time ago. I just really don't think that the leg kicks, the body kicks are going to be enough one at a time to beat Ihor. I think Ihor's going to bum rush Shogun in round 1 and knock him out. If this does, come into the fact that like Ihor Poteiria could empty his gas tank in round 1, and then maybe round 2 and round 3, some crafty clinch work, some crafty slick counters from Shogun Rua. That could be a danger there, but usually Shogun Rua is, either ending the fight by strikes, getting ended by strikes these days, or going to decision in a very close, low-output fight where nobody knows who won, and it's a split result. That's happened, I think, 3 times in his last 5 performances. So give me Ihor Poteiria, round 1 knockout. I will have a moneyline play on Poteiria, who is a minus 190 favorite, moving up towards minus 200. It pains me to see a legend go out, like this in front of his own Brazilian crowd, but that's the way these things go. They rarely go the other way. In the back of my mind, I'll be rooting for Shogun Rua, but I got money on this, so give me Poteiria for that round 1 knockout. Up next at light heavyweight, a very fun matchup between Johnny Walker and Paul Craig. Pretty much a striker versus grappler matchup here between these two, although ironically, Johnny Walker did just come off of a round 1 submission win over Ian Kuntalaba back in September. Paul Craig is coming off of a loss over this last summer, where he faced Volkan Ozdemir and just could not get that grappling game going. After doing it, for an impressive win streak, pulling guard over and over again. He does sometimes go for single and double leg takedowns, body lock trip takedowns, but ultimately, Paul Craig just wants to isolate a limb, and whether it's looking for a heel hook or a knee bar, whether it's looking for an arm bar from guard or a triangle choke, he's been successful. 16 wins, 13 submission victories. And he's only been to decision a couple of times. So that's one thing that both of these guys, Johnny Walker and Paul Craig, have in common is it's likely not going to see the scorecards win or lose. Johnny Walker only been to 3 decisions out of his 26 fights. Paul Craig, not that much different. Only been to 2 decisions out of 22 fights. So fight doesn't go to decision. The unders, definitely a good look for this fight. I think the under 1.5, somewhere around minus 150 or so. That's a little dicey, but most of their wins are also in round 1, so not a bad price, all things considered. Johnny Walker is a minus 200 favorite over Paul Craig, the about plus 170 underdog, and I am siding with Johnny Walker in this matchup. 15 knockouts over his 19 wins, and the guy, he's a wild man, and hopefully he comes back with that athletic, risk-adverse style. I'm not risk-adverse, but like risky style, I should say, where he's going for, flying knees. He's going for, he's setting up traps, feinting you with the rear leg and then going with a step-in lead knee. And he's got some tools to defend against takedowns as well. You saw him defend takedowns from Ryan Spann against the cage and actually knock him out with those elbows. He's just so long with an 82-inch reach that his kicks and his punches can hit you when you cannot hit him back, and Paul Craig will have trouble getting in range, I think, against Johnny Walker. Now, there was the matchup a while back. I think the last time they were actually in Brazil in the UFC, Johnny Walker lost a decision to Nikita Krylov. And although Krylov is a potent finisher, Johnny Walker was able to survive until the scorecards, but he gave up so much control time against the better grappler. That was a bit of an issue, and that's kind of a red flag for this matchup. But how lost Paul Craig looks on the feet, especially against a guy like Volkan Ozdemir in his last fight. It was impressive he survived, but the trick was not working anymore from Paul Craig, where he was, anytime he looked to engage or pull guard or play jiu-jitsu to invite Volkan Ozdemir into his guard, he just wasn't having any of it. So hopefully Johnny Walker can play that game and just land something really crazy and creative on the feet as normal. Spinning elbow against the cage or, a flying knee, something like that. Another one of the best submission guys that Johnny Walker had fought was Misha Serkinov. It only took him about 40 seconds to land that flying knee. So hopefully we see something like that from Walker. I do like him. I got his money line at minus 185. Just paid the price to win 1 unit on Johnny Walker. I'm expecting a round 1 knockout from him. We have Jessica Andrade taking on Lauren Murphy. 125-pound bout here. Jessica Andrade returning to that weight class. She has been bouncing around, 3 weight classes in her career. Was the champion at 115. Made an unsuccessful shot at Shevchenko at flyweight, and now just coming off of that win at 115 over Amanda Lemos. Now coming back up to 125. Lauren Murphy, 39 years old. That's not a good look. She will have, of course, the height and the reach over Andrade, but finds herself a massive underdog here at plus 375. Andrade is the minus 475 favorite. Just by nature, that's kind of wide for a women's division, but this is likely not going to see the scorecards if Andrade gets her way here. She's a potent finisher, has that rare talent of being a power puncher, and also, a threat on the ground as well. She's got good wrestling, averaging a lot of takedowns per 15 minutes, I think close to 2, if not more. And she's got a high-level BJJ game as well. So coming off of the round 1 submission over Amanda Lemos. Actually, Jessica Andrade, her last 8 performances, 7 of them have not seen the scorecards, including 5 of her wins. Her last wins have all been stoppages, 4 of them in round 1. So one thing Lauren Murphy does have going for her is she has not been finished. Aside from Valentina Shevchenko in round 4, that was the only finish she's ever faced, but she's not facing the same level of competition as Jessica Andrade is. So Lauren Murphy, a rangy striker. She will have the height and reach here. She's got competent BJJ as well, and actually edges out close decisions by, mixing in the wrestling and getting control time that way, threatening with submissions, sometimes getting them. She does have 1 submission, but 8 knockouts on her record for Lauren Murphy. But again, level of competition is lacking. She can beat the girls that don't belong, that won't be ranked, but anybody that's got, pretty good talent in the UFC will give her a very close fight or beat her. So I'm taking Jessica Andrade. I think she does get this done inside the distance. Not much I can do with a minus 475 favorite here at Andrade, but I'm pretty confident she gets the job done. She's one of these fighters that will fight for your money, really go in there and just be her opponent's shadow as the smaller woman and get the job done. I love the body shots, too, that she employs. Got Cynthia Calvillo out of there with that about a year and a half ago, so just better everywhere and still has a lot of years left in this division to make a title run. Give me Jessica Andrade pretty confidently here. Up next at welterweight, we've got a very interesting matchup between Gilbert Burns and Neil Magny. And the money line makes this even a little bit more intriguing to me because when I saw this listed, it didn't make any sense to me. We saw Gilbert Burns as a minus 430 favorite right now, plus 360 for Neil Magny, the massive underdog. I was looking for every way to bet Neil Magny when I researched this fight, but quickly when I dove into the statistics and just looking at the tape and reminding myself, who these guys beat, who they lose against, who they struggle against, this made more sense to me. But right off the bat, we're looking at Neil Magny. He's got a huge size advantage with an 80-inch reach, 6'3", and he's a year younger than Gilbert Burns, who's a former lightweight fighter, although he's done his best work and challenged for the belt at 170. But Gilbert Burns has power in his hands, a very explosive striker, a very high-level world champion, world-class BJJ practitioner, with wrestling to back it up and complement that. So he can strike with you, put you away with those strikes, and he can also take the fight to the mat and submit you there. So, that just smells trouble for most people at this weight class, but especially Neil Magny, who tends to struggle against this type of opponent time and time again. One of the most shocking matchups or most troubling matchups on his resume of recent years was early in 2021 when he fought Michael Chiesa on that fight card, main event slot, 5 rounds, and he was controlled for the 15 minutes out of that 25-minute match by Michael Chiesa. You look at a guy like Rafael dos Anjos was able to beat him, submit him. You're looking at Damian Maia submitted Neil Magny. A guy like Ponzinibbio years back, power striker, explosive striker, able to knock him out. So, and then most recently, Shavkat Rakhmonov 2 fights ago, able to ground and submit Neil Magny. So there's been a lot of spots where Neil Magny struggles against that elite level of opponent, specifically the elite grapplers, right? So, he can beat up on the guys that are not good grapplers. He's got enough of a general array of skills, does Magny. He can clinch up and beat you there, like a guy like even Daniel Rodriguez, who he just submitted recently. So the low level, the non-title challengers, the non-ranked guys, Magny can, he can whoop up on them in the grappling and the range striking and just rack up volume in minutes. But a guy like Gilbert Burns and these high level of opponents that I've listed out from Magny, they tend to beat him. So I understand why the money line is wide, but in the favor of Gilbert Burns. But these are the same odds as the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight against Neil Magny. So in a fight that's slated to go to the decision, to the scorecards, or over 2.5 in this matchup, more often than not, according to the sports books. The stellar decision record of Neil Magny, 16-2 in decisions at this weight class. That does make me think that this line is a little bit wide because we're not looking at Gilbert Burns, steamrollering this guy just like he did against Rakhmonov. But I think a finish is in play for Gilbert Burns, so I'm going to take him to win the fight, but there's not much I can do at this money line. I don't feel too strongly one way or the other about the over-under either. So give me Gilbert Burns as a pick, but not much to do betting-wise on this one. Okay, we've made it to the co-main event, flyweight championship on the line between current champion Davison Figueiredo and current interim and former champion Brandon Moreno. This is the fourth time these guys have fought each other. For Davis and Figueiredo, all four of those times have been consecutive, dating back to late 2020. Now, Brandon Moreno actually had a fight against Kai Kara-France last summer, which he won by third-round TKO, since Figueiredo had some hand injuries that were healing up during all of last year. So it's been a year since we've seen Davison. 21-2 losses, 1 draw on his record. Stellar record. I think he's got the most finishes in flyweight history with 7 in the UFC. 9 knockouts, 8 submissions, 4 1-1 in decisions. He is 35 years old, and he's going to be the shorter man and have a little bit less reach, so every tail of the tape advantage goes in the favor of Brandon Moreno, the Mexican fighter, making his way to Brazil against the hostile crowd that is going to be totally behind Figueiredo. 29 years old, still in the prime at this weight class. Like I mentioned, he is a couple inches taller and he's got a bit more reach with that 26-2 draw record. 4 knockouts, 11 submissions, actually. A negative decision result as well, with 5 wins, 6 losses, and 2 draws in his decision record. So he's coming off of that body kick TKO over Kai Kara-France last summer, as I mentioned. But this is going to be a completely different matchup, right back to the races where these guys have competitive matchups time and time again. They've fought 3 times, and they've gone win, loss, and draw against each other in all of those times. So they both have elite cardio, heavy calf kicks, some pretty slick movement. I would say the striking output goes to Brandon Moreno, but of course the fight-ending devastating power goes to Davis and Figueiredo. In fact, 1 year ago at UFC 270, Figueiredo was able to edge out 3 rounds to 2 and win the championship back over Moreno. By just that, I think he got outstruck on the numbers in total, but he had the round-defining moments. He was able to use slick counters, crisp movement, and tight boxing to, get 3 knockdowns over the course of those 5 rounds and steal those rounds with a mix of, clinch work and, wrestling offense as well. So I expect more of that from Figueiredo in this fight. It's a complete even coin toss fight, -110 or -115 for each fighter here. 50-50 as far as the sports books have lined this. I'm going to still give this to Figueiredo. I'm going to pick him. I have a couple units on him at -110. And again, I just think he's going to be the better moment winner in this fight. He might get outstruck again, but using that tight boxing, just very good technique on the feet. I think he's going to pick those shots, score knockdowns again, and either win a decision or a late finish in this fight, because I do expect as the rounds accumulate, I think there'll be a feeling out process early in rounds 1 and 2, but I think the wrestling offense will start to pile up on the part of Figueiredo. I think he'll get control time in the clinch and on the mat, and potentially even lock up a submission later in the fight. But, I do like the overs, the over 3.5, the over 4.5 in this fight as well. I think the fight goes to decision is sitting somewhere around -145 or something. So when more sports books open up the overs and the alternate overs, the over 3.5, I would check that out as well, as most of their fights have gone the distance, except for that second fight where Moreno won the fight. So we got a lot of sample size to choose from, a good opportunity to make a strong opinion, for your fighter here, because we have so many fights between them already. I'm not sure if there's never been 4 fights all in the UFC between 2 combatants, but I can think of like Rampage Jackson versus Vanderlei. They fought 4 times. Once was in the UFC. I think Tim Sylvia and Arlovsky had fought 4 times. I'm not thinking of anybody else. Maybe Ken Shamrock and Tito Ortiz. I think they fought 3 times, and then Frank Shamrock actually fought Tito, so almost counts, but not quite. So this is historic. 4 times for the UFC banner to have 2 elite flyweights go at it. 35 years old for Davis and Figueiredo. He's really pushing the peak of this weight class at flyweight, but I think he's still good enough to get this decision or a late finish in this fight. So again, the pick is Davison. I've got the money line 2-unit bet on him at -110, and I think he'll win this fight in his own home country. Okay, we made it all the way to the main event of UFC 283. We got Jamal Hill taking on Glover Teixeira, the former champion, for the vacant light heavyweight championship bout. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you have not, and let's break into this fight for the vacant strap. Left behind by Yuri Prochazka, who's had a pretty serious shoulder injury. End of last year, they had Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev, who unfortunately they fought to a split draw. So it's still undecided who the champion is. So now we've got this matchup to decide. Former champion Glover Teixeira is 43 years old at this point. Brazilian legend. The guy's been in the UFC for a long time. I was actually in Vegas and saw the fights when he made his debut on the early prelims. Got that arm triangle over Kyle Kingsbury back in the day. I think that was like 2012. And since then, it's been more of the same. I mean, there's been some knockouts from Glover Teixeira. He does have 18 of them, but lately it's been his heavy wrestling game plan, smothering wrestling, and his jiu-jitsu, which is world championship level, ADCC champion, 10 submissions on his record. He is 5-4 in decisions as well, but largely a finisher. Jamal Hill, very good record as well for the young 31-year-old who's in his prime at this weight class with height and reach advantage in the fight as well. Jamal Hill is 11 wins, 1 loss, and 1 no contest, which the no contest was due to a marijuana drug test, and he scored that knockout over Kledson Abreu. So I'll count it as 8 knockouts for Jamal Hill so far, 5 of those in the UFC. He is 4-0 in decisions, and he just really impressed me in his last fight against Thiago Santos, a former title challenger. Back in August, he scored a round 4 TKO stoppage over Thiago Santos, which answered a lot of questions for me with the southpaw striker, because we know that he's got that long snapping jab. We know he's got the left straight, and even the lead right hook for Jamal Hill, which is dangerous as well. Just ask Jimmy Crute, who ate that twice in the span of a minute and got knocked out. But would that power translate late, in the fight? Would Jamal Hill be able to have the cardio to go back and forth with somebody? What if he gets hit clean, in a fight? Does he have the chin to hold up? And does he have any defensive wrestling? Well, all of those questions were answered positively against Thiago Santos. We saw Jamal Hill have to, kind of in a surprise to a lot of us, Thiago Santos actually, put the singlet on and started wrestling, trying to work that part of his game against Jamal Hill, which seems like an obvious strategy for anybody, but we just haven't seen it from Thiago Santos in a while. And Jamal Hill was very good at, digging overhooks, stalemating positions against the cage and in the clinch. And when he did get taken down, get back up to his feet pretty fast. So very good strength and the cardio to match, right? To be able to have the power to knock somebody out after your arms are heavy with 4 rounds of wrestling defense. Very good. And also his chin held up. He ate clean strikes from Santos and some of those breaks from the clinch. And, he was not even wobbled by them. So to finish that fight was pretty good. A high-level win in a very tough fight over 4 rounds. So I like what I see from Jamal Hill. I will pick him to win this fight by knockout. But either way, I think that, Glover Teixeira is a dangerous guy, even at his old age. And probably whoever wins this fight will not be seeing past, 2.5 rounds. I think this goes under 2.5, either the submission win from Texeira or the knockout, which I think is most likely in round 1 from Jamal Hill. Texeira is a legend, but he's 43 years old. You got to think retirement is in the conversation after this fight. All things considered, he's probably not in the best health at 43, but his striking is just so limited, right? That's the main concern. He has like one combination, like either a jab or a hook to an overhand, that he'll swing wildly just to close the distance and try to get up close and clinch up with you to get you to the mat. So he certainly can pull that off. That's not out of the question. He's very live to win this fight. But give me Jamal Hill, the more powerful, dangerous guy on the feet, who showed a lot of good qualities in his last fight. He's getting better, and he's 12 years the younger man. So give me Jamal Hill. Gonna ride this money train. I've got 2 units on him at minus 115. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All the fights broken down for UFC 283. Awesome Brazilian pay-per-view card. I'm so glad the UFC is going back there this weekend for Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill in the main event for the 205-pound strap. Awesome fight card altogether, and this Wednesday night I'll be returning to my weekly live streams, and it's a pay-per-view week, which means I'll be co-hosting with my guy Mike, aka the Couch Warrior podcast. We'll be hosting Gordo Gambles and Liam Picks Fights for a 4-man panel talking UFC 283 betting action. It'll be a lot of fun, and that'll be on my channel Wednesday night at 9:45 p.m. Central Time, 10:45 Eastern Time, and check that out. It'll be a lot of fun. I'll certainly post reminders and tweets about that. So hit the like, hit the subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Good luck in all your betting action. Cheers.